this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting-mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/iHeart. That's prolonlife.com/iHeart.
You see it instantly. It's Coldwater Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
The Middle is supported by Journalism Funding Partners, a nonprofit organization striving to increase the sustainability of local journalism by building connections between donors and news organizations. More information on how you can support The Middle at listentothemiddle.com. Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our house DJ, Tolliver. And Tolliver, this is a milestone episode.
Wait, is it?
It is.
Am I in trouble?
No. It is, if you count all of our One Thing Trump Did podcast extras, which are available, as you know, in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. This is our 100th Middle episode.
Oh my God! You know what? It feels like I just started. It feels like we just got into it.
It does feel like that.
Yes,
but 100 of them. Think about how many guests we've had to book for that. How many calls we've gotten, and how many times you and I have chatted at the beginning and during each episode. It's been fantastic. Mm-hmm. Thank you to everyone who has been listening. You could say we have an abundance of episodes, which is kind of funny because that is the title of the book whose author is with us this hour. The book Abundance is about what America needs in the future and why the government and we the people could do a much better job of achieving those goals. We're going to get to that in just a moment and ask you how you think government can work better to solve the nation's big challenges. As always, your calls are welcome at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. But first, last week on the show, we asked you what you think about the power that billionaires like Elon Musk wield in our politics. We had great calls on the show and even more voicemails that came in afterwards.
Hi, this is Sarah Milstein calling from Milwaukee. Even though I supported Donald Trump, I'm disgusted by the influence of these billionaires, and I deeply, deeply regret ever supporting that man. I'm disgusted.
Hello, my name is Nelson. I think that money should be removed from the process of politics entirely, but I think that the purpose of Doge is admirable and needs to be done in government.
Hey, my name is Ron. I'm in Philadelphia. I don't know why we're so enamored by billionaires. It'd be better to have, like a poor grandmother be in charge of budgets and things. An old grandmother knows how to negotiate and budget. the ultra-rich in charge of everything is not benefiting the rest of America.
Well, thanks to everyone who called in. So now to our topic this hour. How can government work better to solve the nation's big challenges? Tolliver, the phone number again, please.
Yeah, it's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com. You can also comment on our live stream on YouTube.
Joining me this hour, The Atlantic's Derek Thompson, one of the authors of the new book, Abundance, along with Ezra Klein. Derek, welcome to The Middle.
Very good to be here. Thanks, Jeremy.
So for people who haven't read Abundance, you make the case that the United States should return to a politics of abundance rather than a politics of scarcity. Explain the problem with our politics and our government as you see it right now. And by right now, I mean even before Trump came back into office, because your book takes a longer view.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about how the book came together and then talk about how I think the book meets this moment. So I wrote a piece several years ago about an idea that I called the abundance agenda. And this is about the fact that during the pandemic, I felt like America was having to experience just one scarcity after another. There weren't enough masks, and there wasn't enough PPE, there weren't enough vaccines, and there weren't enough free COVID tests. And I just felt like the experience of the pandemic had been shaped by this idea of scarcity. And when I zoomed out of the pandemic itself and thought about America's experience, its economy in the 21st century, I thought there's also not enough homes, there's not enough clean energy. It seems like this has been a century of scarcity, and what America needs in response is an agenda of abundance. So I co-wrote this book with Ezra Klein about this idea called abundance as it extends across housing and energy and invention and innovation. And as it turns out in this moment, I feel like with Trump, this is someone who won the election based on, in many cases, questions of unaffordability. People feeling, again, like there wasn't enough of what they needed. But you look at how he's governed. He seems to consistently, I think, identify scarcities in American society and then try to fix those scarcities with even more scarcities. So, for example,
right now, if you look at what's happening right now, we're having a national discussion about basically how much of the government to cut. DOGE is sort of turning off the spigot places or fires people, and a lot of people realize just how much the government does, how much they rely on the government. Who do you think is winning that argument right now, a few months into Trump's second term?
Well, look, Trump has all the power, right? Trump's the president, and Republicans have Congress, and Republicans have the Senate. And so the degree to which Democrats are winning this debate, or at least Trump is losing it, can't really be seen with the levers of power. You can maybe see it in the polls, right? Donald Trump is now much less popular at this point in his presidency than he was in his first term. But he also started from a much higher place of approval. So I think it's very clear that his policies have been quite unpopular with the public. And you could say, I guess, Jeremy, to your point, maybe that's its own indictment, that people are, at least in surveys, rejecting his ideas. But ultimately, we're not really going to understand who won the tug of war between Democrats and Republicans until we actually vote en masse in this country in 26 and 28.
Well, and if we think about the Democrats, one of the big headlines from your book is that you believe the left in this country has made things too difficult, from housing to infrastructure, too many rules, too many roadblocks to progress. And you argue that the Democrats have, in a way, been their own worst enemies when it comes to achieving the goals and the politics of abundance.
I think this is a really important theme in the book. This idea that, unfortunately, even though I'm a liberal and my co-author is a liberal, I think that if we're being honest with ourselves, in many of the places where liberals have the most power, they aren't achieving the outcomes that they consider their priorities, right? I mean, housing has to be considered a liberal priority, but the 5 states with the highest rates of homelessness, including California, New York, Oregon, these are states governed, in many cases, almost entirely by Democrats. Within the state of California, there's some evidence that as cities become more progressive, the number of houses that they permit declines. So when you add to all of that the housing experience, the clean energy fact, that it is Texas, not California or New York, that leads the country in building solar and wind. I think liberals do have to reckon with the fact that we made it too hard to build what we find important. And much of the book is focused on the barriers to building that exist in the laws that we pass and the rules that we allow.
Let's get to the phones. And Mary, who is calling, again, people can reach us at 844-4-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Mary is in Parksville, Tennessee. Mary, welcome to the Middle. Go ahead with your thoughts on how the government might work better to achieve big goals.
Yeah, I disagree that there's too much regulation. Maybe there's a little too much regulation on how businesses are run, but I feel that there needs to be more regulation requiring employers to provide good retirement programs, good healthcare programs, because people are just underwater from everyday expenses, from medical to horrible interest rates, and they're just not able to save for their future or for
so
emergency.
You'd like to see more regulation, not less.
I'd like to see more regulation. I mean, if I'm completely honest, I'd like to see a universal basic income and universal health care, but that's not going to happen.
Do you think more regulation is possible at this point in the world that we live in 2025? It seems like the regulations are only being cut right now.
No, I don't think it's possible at all. I think that lobbyists and business have way too much power over our politicians, over our elected officials, over the policies that they introduce and enact, or that fail to do so.
Mary, thank you very much. Let me take that to Derek. Derek Thompson. Interesting to hear there's a call for more regulation, not less, but also Mary brings up the idea of lobbyists and the power that they have. How did you think about that in thinking about the themes of your book?
Well, I think that sometimes this concept of regulation and deregulation, in a way, these words feel so strongly to us that they sometimes disguise what we really mean. Right? When someone says, I want more regulation because I want more protections for workers who can be abused by employers, well, of course, I think employees should not be able to be, financially taken advantage of by their bosses. But that has very little to do with a lot of the regulations that we're talking about in this book. Right now, what I think is that when it comes to zoning regulations in many American cities, many superstar American cities, it's zoning regulations, not labor regulations, that we're looking to cut. So here, I think it's not so much that regulations are good and deregulations is bad, or that deregulation is good and regulation is bad. Rather, people should be thinking about the outcomes that they want from different parts of the economy and society. Yes, we want a high minimum wage and a high living wage, but that goal doesn't have a lot to do with zoning regulations that get in the way of adding housing in superstar cities.
You mentioned zoning and you mentioned Texas. I just think of Houston, which famously doesn't have zoning. You can have like a strip club right next to a daycare center in Houston because of that. You think that that's the model that we should be going for?
Well, it's funny. I don't live in Houston. I don't think you live in Houston at the moment. So, you and I have not decided to move to Houston for its many benefits. However, Houston and Texas is growing much faster than California and New York. Right? The opinion that matters is not really mine or yours. It's the tens of thousands, even millions of people that are moving to places like Texas and Florida and the Great Southwest and moving out of, unfortunately, a lot of cities where they want to live. Like, there's so many working class people who want to live in San Francisco and Los Angeles and Portland, but can't afford to. They're moving to Texas because Texas is building.
And Derek, I'm glad you brought up San Francisco and Los Angeles because Tolliver, one of the things that they talk about in this book is the proposal for a high-speed train between San Francisco and L.A. Spoiler alert, it doesn't exist and it's nowhere near existing.
Yeah, which pains me. Listen to this clip of former Governor Jerry Brown, a Democrat who approved billions for the proposal in 2012, followed by current Governor Gavin Newsom, also a Democrat, changing course when he took office in 2019.
This is a time to invest, to create thousands of jobs like this project. You have to take the bull by the horns and start spending and investing in things that make sense. That's why we're here today.
Let's be real. The current project, as planned, would cost too much and respectfully take too long. There's been too little oversight and not enough transparency. Right now, there simply isn't a path to get from Sacramento to San Diego, let alone from San Francisco to L.A.
A Tale of Two Democrats.
Boo.
And by the way, Tolliver, I looked it up. It takes 11 hours or so to take the slow train that exists right now from San Francisco to Los Angeles. It would take, well, between 6 and 11 hours to drive, depending on when you leave. So
I'm just going to walk. I'm going to walk it.
Right. That'll take a long time. We'll be right back with more of The Middle.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
You see it instantly. It's Coldwater Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to the A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here and my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, and philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're asking you, how can government work better to solve the big challenges we face? Tolliver, what is the number to call in?
It's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on social media.
I'm joined by Atlantic staff writer and co-author of the new book, Abundance, Derek Thompson. And let's go to Kutch, who's in Harvard, Illinois. Kutch, go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah, I had two core thoughts. We have an energy consulting business. We help everything from renewables to peaker plants, even nuclear uprating. And I wanted to, Derek is probably familiar with the policies of like OSHA or EPA, say 30-day review, but they take a year, 18 months. Oftentimes it's nearly bankrupting our projects. The other thing is stakeholders. There was this Justice 40 thing that Biden had and brought in all sorts of so-called stakeholders, but they just wind up being professional blackmailers. I mean, these this good thing where you wanted to have community buy-in, great, but that's never what happened. These professional organizations would come in and claim to be representing distressed communities, and they wanted obviously some sort of payoff, some sort of buy-in, some sort of ownership, and it was never the local people. These were national organizations that would come in claiming to be stakeholders in some local project. So I just wanted to get Derek's opinion on what it was, what we could do to streamline these efforts. Where my opinion is that with the review process, if the policy or law says it's 30 or 90-day review, at the end of 90 days, if there's no decision, we should be able to act as if we got
they take
the
a lot
license.
longer than that. Great. Kutch, thank you very much for that. Let's get Derek's thoughts.
I think Kutch is exactly right. I mean, I don't know too much about the second thing he was talking about, but the first thing is a really profound thesis of this book. I mean, it is so damn hard to build stuff in this country, especially compared to the 1950s and 1960s. And this isn't just true for apartment buildings. It's not just true for skyscrapers. It's not just true for roads. It's not just true for highways or bridges. It's true for everything you want to build in the world of energy, as the caller was saying. It's difficult sometimes to build the places where energy is created, right? A solar power plant or a solar farm, or certainly nuclear power, but also at taking that original piece of energy, say that original piece of electricity that's created in the solar farm, and transmitting it to its final consumer across transmission lines. The degree that transmission line construction in this country has slowed down over the last few decades, just as we need it to accelerate. It's just really extraordinary. And so much of the book is, yes, a kind of nerdy investigation of exactly how certain rules and regulations that have gotten in the way of building work. But it's also kind of like a cry from the heart that there's a lot of problems, especially in clean energy, that can only be solved by building. And we really are right now getting in our own way.
You mentioned COVID early on in this conversation, and I do want to bring that up because as you talk about the fact that we're not building all these things, the country did come together and come up with a vaccine for COVID-19 very quickly, like in record time, at warp speed, you might say, mostly because of government help. And yet today, nobody in either party wants to talk about that. The Republican, the Trump administration who did that don't want to take credit for it because there are a lot of vaccine skeptics in their base. And the Democrats don't seem to be talking about it either.
It really is, Jeremy, like the strangest political orphan in like the modern history of American law. I mean, what do we want laws to do at the end of the day? We want the law to do what it says on the tin. We want the law to do what people say it's going to do when they get up and introduce it. And here was a law where we basically said we're going to try to break the land speed record for developing a vaccine by practically an order of magnitude. And then we actually did it. And we've basically taken no lessons from it. Like, there is no Operation Warp Speed for everything. No one's trying to use this model for Alzheimer's or diabetes or obesity. It's basically been lost to the dustbin of history. And that's just so strange, right? Republicans could absolutely say that this is one of the most important things that Donald Trump ever did. And Democrats, I think, could say, well, look, we want government to work. We want it to work on behalf of people. What's better than a free vaccine that saved millions of lives? But the lessons of OWS have really been lost. And I would just like to name two really quickly. Operation Warp Speed did a lot of investing as subsidy and just giving money to companies that were researching these drugs. But it also designed a funding mechanism that's called pull funding, which is kind of like a prize. We said we're only going to give you these billions and billions of dollars if your COVID vaccine therapy passes a very high threshold. We could do this for all sorts of medicines and breakthroughs. We could say that we're going to give companies like $10 billion if they come up for a cure for pancreatic cancer, and here's all the indications, the threshold they have to pass. There's so many ways I think we could use pull funding, but for whatever reason, we just haven't taken lessons from one of the most important laws passed in modern American history. I just think it's very, very bizarre, and I wish we learned from history rather than forgot it.
You can tell that you spend a lot of time looking at the COVID vaccine program, Operation Warp Speed, that you called it OWS, which I've never heard anybody use that phrase before. But Derek, obviously you've been living in that world for a while. Let's go to Jocelyn, who is in Houston, Texas. Jocelyn, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead with your thoughts about how to make government work better.
Thank you. Appreciate your show a lot.
Thank you.
So I think the thing that needs to happen is a lot more cooperative thinking between the two parties, since that's what we're stuck with. I've really been an advocate that we needed more parties because of this block between the two. But they definitely need to start talking more together and coming up with solutions. I was saying I'm a conservative, my daughter's a liberal. We get in arguments all the time, and we come up with great solutions that are in the middle. You know, I'll give a little, she'll give a little. And I don't see our government doing it, and I don't see our mainstream media encouraging it. You know, they're always encouraging, the bad behavior and not the cooperative behavior. They should demand cooperative behavior between the two parties. Every time you're addressing a topic, there should be a conservative and there should be a liberal, smart, equally smart on both sides. I hate it when they kind of pit, someone of a lesser intelligence against someone with more. But, there are great things that could be done for the American people in the middle. And that's what needs to happen. Media needs to encourage it.
I agree with you, Jocelyn, that the media needs to encourage it.
To do a lot more.
I totally agree with you that's a big part of what this show is all about. And by the way, I was talking to somebody the other day who said, you know how you could really just explode your podcast download numbers, just get really partisan because that's what people want. I'm like, no, but that's not what we're trying to do here. That's not what we're trying to do. Jocelyn, thank you for that call. And Derek, your thoughts about would more bipartisanship, the parties not fighting with each other so much, but actually working together, make a big difference in terms of getting big things done?
I think the answer is definitely yes, but the real question is how does that happen? And maybe it's interesting to look at some places where you do see bipartisanship right now to take a little bit of a lesson, right? David Leonhardt from the New York Times wrote this really interesting column maybe 1 or 2 years ago that he called the New Washington Consensus. It was about the idea that when it comes to certain laws, like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, to a certain extent the CHIPS and Science Act, some laws that have to do with Ukraine and some laws that have to do with national security vis-a-vis China, there's like a surprising amount of bipartisanship, especially under Biden. And what that tells me is that domestic politics is going to encourage polarization, but where the parties tend to come together is when they perceive an external threat, right? There's more bipartisanship on issues related to China than on issues related to, say, gender or sports. So I think that's just like, I don't have a formula for bipartisanship. I think that's far beyond my talents as an analyst, but I do think that it is interesting to note that the thing that seems to be a stimulus for bipartisanship is external threats, for better or for ill. And maybe there's a lesson there in terms of pitching ideas in order to garner bipartisan support.
Let's go to Roger, who's in McCall, Idaho. Hi, Roger. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Oh, hey, thank you. Yeah, I was calling. I used to be the planning director in Missoula, Montana, and the mayor there, the late, great John Engen, used to say Missoula is a Native American word meaning no. And the zoning ordinance there, which was based on the Hoover administration's Department of Commerce model zoning ordinance, which most American communities are, when something bad happened, the city council passed a law making it difficult to do again and again and again. And it became this kind of Rube Goldberg way of saying no to just about anything. And we had the most progressive comprehensive plan on the planet, and then rules that dated back to Herbert Hoover. So what we worked on was, rather than making it difficult to do the wrong thing, let's make it ridiculously easy to do the right thing. I think we need to see more of that here in this country.
How do you do that? Just quickly, Roger, how do you make it ridiculously easy to do the right thing? Just give me an example.
You don't stop with the vision. There's so many cities and counties and communities around the country that put a lot of time into putting a comprehensive plan together, a plan for the future. The city council passes it, and then they walk off, and they don't bother with dotting the I's and crossing the T's of putting the regulations together that make that vision easy to do.
Yeah. Roger, thank you. Derek, you have a line in your book that gets to this. You say it doesn't matter what gets spent, it matters what gets built.
Yep, that's exactly true. I mean, Montana's done a really interesting job. I mean, Montana Miracle, a famous set of housing bills passed in 2023 or 2024 that you had some movement on ADUs, accessory dwelling units. I believe you also had some streamlining to the permitting process. And it's the latter that I think is most important that Roger was talking about. You have to make it fast. A lot these houses, this energy, it's built by companies, and delay is money. Delay is time, and time is money. And so anything that accelerates the process is going to seem to companies like saving them money. So if you want to make it cheap, you want to make it fast. And I think that more city planners and more mayors and city councils need to think really deeply about, okay, if what we want is more housing, how do we make it ridiculously fast for companies to get through the process of permitting and beginning and ending construction?
Tolliver, I know some comments are coming in online.
Yeah, okay. So this is Jeff in Columbia, South Carolina. He says the reason underlying all of this lack of building of affordable housing infrastructure and energy infrastructure is baby boomers. They have been the pig and the python, write that one down, their whole lives. When they were young, we built schools, suburbs, universities, and all the infrastructure needed to support this huge generation.
Derek, what do you think about that, blaming the baby boomers?
Well, look, baby boomers are of a certain age right now that they are a lot of homeowners, and to the extent that part of the reason why we don't have more housing in a lot of dense and rich cities is NIMBYism, homeowners who are against building in their own backyards. Yeah, maybe it is the case that sort of disproportionately boomer homeowners across America are a major impediment to housing abundance. That's possible. But I also feel like, as a political statement, you don't want to be demonizing like 80 million people at the same time. I prefer to see this as a problem that is sensitive to persuasion rather than demonizing whole generations. I'm a member of the millennial generation. I'm very familiar with people.
Same with Tolliver, too.
Us for all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember how we are the avocado toast that we were buying in 2014 were ruining the economy? I mean, so this is maybe why I'm like a little bit once burnt, twice shy when it comes to generation generalizations, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Now I just make my own avocado toast. It's very easy. You just take a little bit of avocado, some olive oil, lemon, salt, and pepper on the toast. Done. And it's a lot cheaper than buying it out at the restaurant. Let's go to Annie, who's in Barrington, Rhode Island. Hi, Annie. Welcome to The Middle. What do you think? Annie?
I think that we're being presented with false. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Annie.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello. Okay.
Yep, we can hear you. Yeah.
I think we're being presented by false choices by both the writer and also the guests, because it's not too many regulations or no regulations, because we need regulations to some extent. You have to tell people what the regulations are for, and then do they want them? So yes, let's tear everything up. But then you say, oh, but that means you have really dirty water, and your kids can't breathe, and they have asthma. So I think it's not fair to say fewer regulations. The other issue is I have no problem with blaming the baby boomers. I think people are really selfish, and they want to keep what they have. And so one incentive could be give them the ability, some incentives to take the 3-acre property they have in Weston, Massachusetts, and say, we will give you incentives to actually build small cottages or something like that, or something else, or elderly people who have far more real estate than they can afford. They're real estate rich, but they can't pay the taxes. Well, can we use your property to do that? But the problem with getting rid of regulations is that they're there for a reason. But I do agree that
Well, and I think probably
away with them. So tell
Annie,
them why
I would bet that Derek actually would agree with you on the need for regulation. But Derek, how do you answer Annie that you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of regulations?
Yeah, I mean, this is a common question about the book and about our politics, which is, are you just against all regulations? The answer is obviously no. We're not against all regulations, but maybe a harder question to answer is, how do you decide which environmental regulations you're for and which environmental regulations you think are getting in the way of, ironically, the cause of environmentalism? So here's one way I think about it. There's aspects of the Clean Air and Water Act that are outcome-based regulations. They say, from a parts per million perspective, the air has to be this clean, and the water has to be this clean, and the tailpipes can't have this level of emissions. But there's other environmental regulations that essentially exist to make it easy for neighbors to use environmental assessment and environmental review to stop the construction of anything that changes the physical world around them. And that, ironically, has the result of blocking solar farms and wind turbines and transmission lines, all of which would help us build a clean energy economy. So that's the distinction between, I think, an outcome-based regulation, which I tend to support, and a process-based regulation, which can ultimately become the tool of the moneyed elite to simply have their way in the world.
Well, Tolliver, there have been a lot of calls from both parties to do what we've been talking about, build more housing for Americans, and especially affordable housing.
Yeah, and sometimes people say they want housing, but what are the words? Not in my backyard, NIMBY, right?
Right.
That may have been a new phrase back in this 1988 news report.
It's called NIMBY, not in my backyard. City planners say the attitude is spreading and causing widespread social disruption.
A lot of the NIMBYism manifests itself in the stuff that's clearly unacceptable, solid waste dumps or prisons. But there are things that really are very benign, and yet everywhere you go, people say, yeah, we need a library, we need a daycare center, or we need an airport, but we never want it in our own neighborhood.
Yards? Who's got yards? I'm in a city, man. We got parking lots.
Then you don't have to worry about this problem. It's not for you, Tolliver. We'll
not
be right
my
back
back
with
lot.
More of the middle.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
You see it instantly. It's Cold Water Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, right, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here and my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and this hour we're asking you, how can government work better to solve the big issues we face? You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also reach out to us at listentothemiddle.com. My guest is Atlantic staff writer Derek Thompson, whose new book is called Abundance. Derek, I want to ask you one more thing about affordable housing, which you obviously touch on a lot of other topics in here that I want to get to. But the one other thing is, what do you think is the connection between the availability of affordable housing and homelessness, which so many cities are seeing? Because many people would look at the homeless issue and say, oh, it's about the government benefits that some homeless get in some cities. That's why there are more homeless in some places or others, or it's a mental health issue. But what about the connection just between the affordability of a city and the amount of homeless people who end up there?
Yeah, this is a good, deep question. And I am persuaded by the idea that homelessness is fundamentally a housing problem. This is why, in a nutshell, mental health issues are national. There are people with schizophrenia in every state. There are thousands of people with schizophrenia in practically every state. There are all sorts of issues of economic insecurity that are national as well. But homelessness tends to be very spiky. It's much, much higher in some cities than others. And in those cities, you do tend to see evidence of housing scarcity, not just high homelessness, but also low vacancy rates. Vacancy rates are sort of an industry term for the amount of housing stock that's not currently occupied by an owner or a renter. And what this tells me is that, like, life is hard, and there's a lot of people who maybe live at the margin of being homed. They're in one place and out of another. And in that game of musical chairs, when there's more chairs that are open, it's easier to lose your housing in one place and find it in another. But in cities where there aren't enough chairs for the game of musical chairs that's going to happen, there's going to be people who are left out. And those are the people that we see on the streets. So I am persuaded by the case that homelessness is profoundly a housing issue.
There are a lot of people who agree. I've done a lot of reporting on homelessness in my career, and there are many people who agree with you about that. Let's go to Chris, who's in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hi, Chris. Welcome to The Middle. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Hi. Hello. I'll give it up front, I'm a boomer, and I don't think my generation is the cause of all evil. I would say the problem is that our dysfunctional government has to do with the absolute inability to compromise. You have two parties for the most part, and they are absolutely unwilling to give ground. You know, it's give it to me my way, or I'm taking my ball and bat and going home. You know, in the city I live in, it's, you know, dominated by liberals, and they, you know, if you don't do it their way, you don't get things. You know, I've property, and they can't because the city won't let them. So I think you have to be able to compromise, and the way we are right now, people will refuse to do it. They just will not meet in the middle.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Chris. And at the national level, of course, we see that right now, Derek. People not just unwilling to compromise, but retribution against people, taking people out just because the previous administration put them in. We see just a lot of funding being cut just because it had to do with Biden's priorities as opposed to Trump's priorities. Now, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's awful. And I think it's incredibly stupid and incredibly counterproductive. I mean, what Trump and Trump's advisors tend to say over and over again about these tariffs is that it's all about reshoring manufacturing in areas that are critical to our national interest. Well, if you wanted to reshore in areas critical to our national interest, surely you'd be interested in, say, building nuclear power or building advanced computer chips. But the Trump administration, because it hates the concept of progressivism and Biden so much, is also dismantling the Department of Energy Loan Programs Office, which is the number one institution for funding nuclear power. They're dismantling the CHIPS and Science Act, which is responsible for building the fabs, the factories that make the most advanced computer chips. And so you have this level of negative polarization in the Trump administration, this level of hatred, really, that is so blinded policymakers on the right now that they cannot see that their attempts to dismantle Biden's legacy are actually getting in their own way and keeping them from, say, building nuclear power and advanced computer chips. It's madness, but it's the kind of madness that only comes from deciding that you hate something more than you want to achieve anything.
Let's go to Brooks, who's in Greenville, South Carolina. Hi, Brooks. Welcome to The Middle. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Hey, I feel like a part of this discussion, whenever you're talking about efficiency or like how something can work better, that gets missed is kind of the idea that efficiency sometimes can be an illusion, in that what seems efficient is really efficient at passing the buck or outsourcing something, and so to me, when I think about our government and maybe what's failed us, I think about competitive federalism particularly. You have all these different layers of government, and it seems like we've taken the approach that it's easier to dangle money than it is to dangle regulation. And I feel like due to the lack of synergy between local governments and state governments and federal governments, we get a lot of inefficient spending because, funding goes to groups that put together the best grant applications and may not consider more holistic needs for funding and those sorts of things. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up and, interested if some of that might have been covered in the book or anything like that.
Yeah. Derek.
A little bit, like at a high level, a lot of this is in the book. I think it's important to say, like, the book doesn't try to talk about absolutely everything. One of the bigger criticisms of the book, actually, as we've sort of, gone around the country and talked about it, is that, people tend to have their own big thing that they want to see in a book about the future of liberalism. Some people want to see more antitrust, or some people want to see more anti-oligarchy. Some people want more focus on housing. Some people want much less focus on housing. This book, I think, is overall like a fairly narrow message. The narrow message is that there are a handful of really wonderful progressive priorities: housing, clean energy, the importance of science, and therefore the importance of scientific invention. And we're interested in understanding how these systems work and in understanding how sometimes we get in our own way. That is to say, how liberals and the liberal preference for process sometimes gets in our own way. And one big part of that, one big sort of takeaway from our analysis of how long many sort of progressive processes take, is that speed really is a progressive priority. In so many cases, in housing and clean energy, in building just about anything in the physical world that the caller was talking about, it's just really damn hard to do things. And if what we want to do is build in this country houses, manufacturing, we have to do it faster.
Let's go to Eric, who's in Chicago. Hi, Eric. Welcome to The Middle. What do you think government could, how could it work better and achieve the goals that it wants to?
Well, I'm an architect and a neighborhood president in the city of Chicago. And, so the conversation about zoning and regulations and is particularly interesting to me. I think there's some issues with, as far as kind of the conversation about deregulating or eliminating some of our protections of zoning. As a neighborhood leader, zoning is sometimes the only tool that my neighbors, my community has to protect itself from inappropriate development. Or in the case, about a decade ago, I lived in Kansas City. Similarly, I was a neighborhood leader there. Lived in a neighborhood that was constantly under threat of large developments, gobbling up small single-family homes and really changing the character of the neighborhood, but also making it inaccessible for the people that live there. And so, zoning is, I think, has been used or can be used as a protection for that. The other thing I notice a lot as I work in different municipalities around the country is that, a lot of our communities have privatized their plan review. And the thought is that might, speed up the process or make the process more efficient in other ways. And that has really not been the case in my observation. One thing I do see is that, when you have a conversation about making government smaller and about deregulation, that inevitably, like what we're seeing in Washington, D.C., is talking about, eliminating jobs, getting rid of the people that would be helping to speed up these processes. So in these communities that privatize plan review or zoning review, that's a cause for, eliminating some of those positions that are very important to keeping the process moving efficiently.
Yeah, well, Eric, that's a great point, and let me take that to Derek. Derek, as we watch DOJ go into department after department and cut things, do you see any way that that's going to make things more efficient, make government work better to be eliminating so many positions and probably a lot of regulation in the process?
No, absolutely not. No, DOJ doesn't know what it's doing. DOJ is profoundly inept as an organization. It's fairly stunning to me how little they understand about what they're cutting. You can see this just made plain in their outcomes. At every single organization, every single department that they've fired people or dismissed people, they've had to eventually call them back because they realized they were firing or dismissing absolutely essential workers, right? So they're shooting first and then asking questions second. You look what's happening at the FDA. They want to increase the efficiency of the FDA. Well, what does efficiency at the FDA mean? Ultimately, what you want is for the FDA to approve the drugs that make us healthy and to exclude and not approve the drugs that aren't safe or aren't effective. What you need to do that are people. But instead, because DOJ only understands the logic of cutting, they dismissed hundreds and hundreds of FDA workers that now many folks in the biotech industry are saying the result of that will slow down drug approval. They've made the process less efficient by cutting it, not more efficient by cutting it. So many of these problems, whether it's housing or clean energy or how to accelerate drug approvals at the federal level, this is not about having an ideology that's the key that opens every single lock. You have to actually understand what it is you're doing and what it is you're trying to do. I don't think DOJ does.
Tolliver, I'm looking at the phone lines, and they've been all full from all over the country, but I know you're looking at the comments coming in online, and they're coming in fast, too.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with this petty one real quick. Robin in Houston says, on tonight's show, Jeremy mentioned the lack of zoning in Houston. I live in Houston, and while it's true Houston doesn't have much commercial and residential zoning, you cannot build a strip club next to a nursery. Okay. The middle. You cannot build a strip club next to a nursery. Kara in No, Minnesota says, we boomers would love to give up our homes if appropriate elder community housing were available. And Trisha in Chicago says, people are moving to places with little regulation because jobs move there because there's little regulation, including low pay, no unions, little environmental, you guessed it, regulations.
All right. And let's get to another call. And Stacy, who's in Morrisville, Vermont. Hi, Stacy. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Hi. I just think the priorities are wrong, that we spend too much money on bombs to kill people instead of building what we need here.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point, and that you think that's keeping us from achieving our goals, the wars that have been going on over the years around the world.
Oh yeah, I mean, think of all the money and think of all the horrible things happening to people that, it's just money could be better spent. And I just want to say I'm an old grandma hippie, and I think we need to really start respecting Mother Earth more. And I know technology is real popular, but I think everybody needs to go out and hug a tree. That's it.
Yeah, Stacy, thank you. And Derek, that brings us to a very interesting point that you bring up in this book, and we haven't really talked about that much, which is that inventing our way out of some of the problems that we face, including the climate crisis, is something that the government should be doing. And maybe it's going to be something that we don't even know exists yet that gets us out of these issues that we're dealing with. Do you think that could happen in the United States, that maybe there's a new power source, fusion power or something like that, comes along and saves the day and we don't have to worry about any of this anymore?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's going to be very, very hard. I think energy is hard, chemistry is hard, physics is hard. This is a lot of hard science. I do think it's possible. And I think it's worth remembering, how we got here. In a world where we had never invented the photovoltaic cell, where we had never invented solar energy, it wouldn't be possible to lean on solar energy the way this country and so many countries around the world are. But technology creates new possibilities. Creating solar energy, right? Inventing the efficient photovoltaic cell, which I believe happened at Bell Labs, took a really dedicated group of scientists working in an institution they felt safe in, that they didn't think was going to implode. This is Bell Labs, the R&D factory of AT&T in the middle of the 20th century. One thing this tells me is that really good science can be done when scientists are left alone to be scientists. And right now, we are certainly not doing that. And the Trump administration is going after Harvard, Columbia, Northwestern, Cornell. They're cutting between 30 and 50% from the NIH and NSF budgets. People at the NIH and at universities across the country don't know if a new keyword search is going to turn up some word in their paper that's going to be looked on disfavorably by the administration. This is not the way to make scientists feel like they can take big risks. This is I think, a very dangerous way to try to invent the future.
I've just got about a minute left here, Derek, but let me ask you one more question. You write in the book that liberals need to recognize when the government is failing. Conservatives need to recognize when it is needed. What do you think the political middle should be doing?
I think the middle should be curious. I think the middle should be curious. I think the middle should, one of the virtues of not naming yourself after a party, right? I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, is that you're always deciding, right? You're hopefully always thinking, and that requires intense curiosity about what's happening in the world and which parties are following up their goals with action. I think that curiosity should be the watchword of the middle, I guess.
Yeah. That is Derek Thompson, a staff writer for The Atlantic, co-author of the new book, Abundance. Derek, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And don't forget, The Middle is available as a podcast in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. And come into your feed in the next few days, an episode of our weekly podcast extra, One Thing Trump Did, where we will talk about U.S.-Canada relations following the national election in Canada, which was all about Trump. Next week, we'll be right back here asking you what improvements still need to be made in society for people with disabilities.
As always, you can call in at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also reach out to listentothemiddle.com. You can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter and buy Middle merch, which just is going to list Houston zoning regulations.
Oh, boy.
From here on out.
The Middle is brought to you by Longnook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, and produced by Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, Sam Burmistaz, John Barth, Annika Deschler, and Brandon Kondritz. Our technical director is Jason Croft. Thanks to our satellite radio listeners, our podcast audience, and the more than 430 public radio stations making it possible for people across the country to listen to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I'll talk to you next week.
You see it instantly. It's Coldwater Creek, the mark of exceptional workmanship and signature touches inspired by a Mountain West heritage. Distinctive styles created from quality fabrics, silhouettes perfected with just the right drape, feel-good fits offering ease of movement, and thoughtful details to elevate your look. Coldwater Creek's authenticity is embodied in every piece, embracing its confident spirit that carries through to today. Discover Coldwater Creek clothing, designed to fit your life the way you want. For a wardrobe you can count on season after season, visit coldwatercreek.com. Shop the new spring collection at 20% off $75 or more with code IHEART20.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969, Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I actually drive better when I'm high. It heightens my senses, calms me down. If anything, I'm more careful. Honestly, it just helps me focus.
That's probably what the driver who killed a 4-year-old told himself. And now he's in prison. You see, no matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.